Welcome to Bill and Tony's Excellent Adventure in Music. Here are your hosts, Bill Fraser and Tony Sartu.
Welcome to Bill and Tony's Excellent Adventure in Music. I'm Bill.
And I'm Tony.
And we're going to explore our love for music by sharing some facts and our thoughts on some of the best albums of all time.
And today's album is Exile in Guyville by Liz Phair. On the Rolling Stone 2003 Top 500 list, it was number 328. In 2012, it was number 327. But in 2020, it moved all the way up to number 56. So the reason why we chose this album, besides the fact that it is a really important album in rock and roll history, is Liz Phair was celebrating the 30th anniversary of the release of this album this year with a tour. And we went to see the tour just the day before Thanksgiving in late November of this year. So that's why we decided to do this album for this pod.
And she just wrapped up her tour. I believe her very last show was in Cleveland, I think it was. So she just wrapped up her tour and it got rave reviews. I had an excellent time at the show. It was a tremendous concert. I thought she sounded amazing live and was just blown away by hearing the album start to finish.
I couldn't agree with you more. You know, one of the narratives that we might touch on later is how bad of a performer she was when this album came out. And it was great. You know, it wasn't a whole lot of action, but just she sounded amazing, which is really all we care about.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I think, to the history of it, to your point, Tone, she wasn't a recording artist when she made this album. She was a visual artist. I mean, she went to school and she was an artist, but she was not a recording artist or musical artist. She just had these words in her head and she, was always musical, and this album came together. So when she was releasing this album at the time, I think we're seeing the tour that is the polished Liz Phair versus, the writer Liz Phair, effectively.
It took her 30 years to become this person.
Yeah.
Yes, because she was, at the time when the album came out, she had never performed live. Can you imagine having a record out that you had never performed in front of anyone before? And now all of a sudden you have an album out. It's amazing.
That is absolutely insane. I find it hard to even fathom.
Yeah, I agree. Because even in today's day and age, there's the thing called, I think they call it like bedroom rock or whatever, where these people get their start on YouTube and they're just like playing songs in their bedrooms, but they're performing. They're performing to other people. These people aren't in person, but they are performing for people. And Liz was just performing for herself in her bedroom. And so we'll get to more of that as we go along. So, So I guess that, so do you have a personal history with Exile or with Liz Phair?
I really don't. I mean, when this album came out, it was right at the end of, time at school at Rutgers. It was not something that was on my radar, even a little bit. I mean, I'd heard her name, but I never heard the album.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's exactly my experience. So, but I do have personal history between when it was released and when we saw her in November. This was the story that I told you to remind me to tell you.
I can't wait to hear this story.
So first of all, shouts to Rick and Dave, my partners in crimes, my brothers. On April 3, 2004, we bought tickets to see Liz Phair at the Roseland Ballroom in Manhattan. And we decided to stop. Just next door was a place called the Russian Vodka Room. Needless to say, lots of vodka was consumed. But we still thought that we were rolling in on time because there was an opening act. This opening act was a brand new artist. Nobody had heard of him, or no, actually, he was just breaking out. His name was Jason Mraz. Have you heard of him? So he's got this huge hit, Remedy, and he's like this, really hot rising star. We're at the Russian Vodka Room. We drink a ton of vodka. We roll over to the Roseland. It's in between acts. And, sometimes, you'll have the headliner, then you'll have an opener, and then you might even have like third acts that aren't on the bill. So we come in between acts, and then Jason Mraz comes out and he plays Remedy, and then he plays for like another hour plus, and then he plays Remedy again. And we're just like, what the heck is going on here? Why are you playing Remedy twice and you're playing for so long, and Liz Phair still hasn't come out? And then the lights come up, show is over. Apparently, Jason Mraz was so big, they flipped the bill and he became the headliner, and Liz opened up for him.
That's
So
crazy.
so we missed the entire show, and
So you went to the Liz Phair concert. You got in to see what you thought was the opener, and you missed Liz Phair.
yeah, so I've been to a Liz Phair concert before, and that's my personal history. Besides that, I'd never listened to Exile. I wasn't familiar with her songs except for some of the ones that were more popular, but I wasn't, really knowledgeable about her music or a fan. All right, so those are our personal histories. So as far as listener comments go, we're recording this without having released any of the prior episodes. So what we'd love to ask you to do is reach out to us if you have any comments on the other season 3 episodes that have just come out. By the time you're listening to us, that'd be great. If you have any specific comments about your own personal experiences with Liz Phair or Exile and Guyville, we'd love to hear from you. So please definitely hit us up with that.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you. And you can reach us on email at bill@bntexcellent.com or tony@bntexcellent.com. On social media, on Instagram, we're Bill and Tony Pod. On X or Twitter, we're Bill and Tony Pod. And on Facebook, we're BNT Excellent.
Great. So looking forward to hearing from you guys. Bill, you want to tell us about the social and musical context of the time?
So let's get into 1993. So Clinton was inaugurated in January of 93. We saw the World Trade Center bombing. That was when the van parked below the North Tower exploded and killed, I think, 6 people and 1,000 were injured. Janet Reno became the first female attorney general of the United States. If I said Waco, Texas, what comes to mind?
The Branch Davidians.
The Branch Davidians. Not see, like you ask people now, and they'd say, "Oh, it's the Chip and Joanna Gaines. They're in Waco, Texas."
Oh.
But like anybody who's our age, it's the Branch Davidians. It's David Koresh. So David Koresh and the Branch Davidians had the 51-day standoff in Waco, Texas, with the ATF, and the standoff ended with the raid and 76 people, including David Koresh, being killed. Really stands out. I mean, it was a really vibrant memory for me, that whole standoff and what was going on there. 93, Tone, do you remember that big snowstorm, that big blizzard of 93 as well?
Hell yeah.
I remember having to shovel my car out on Easton Avenue. It was buried, like completely buried. I was living right on the corner on Easton, and it was just brutal. My car was like under 3 feet of snow or 4 feet of snow. It was ridiculous. Also in 93, Bruce Lee's son, Brandon Lee, died filming The Crow. I remember that very vividly as well. That, the accident with the blanks in the gun on set were just, it was a horrible thing. Prince changed his name. So in 1993, Prince became not Prince anymore. He became a symbol. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was sworn in on the Supreme Court. River Phoenix died of a drug overdose. And the Food Network, Tone, the Food Network made its debut. Where would we be without the Food Network?
I have to tell you that a lot of Food Network has been consumed in my household over the years.
So that's a little bit about what was going on in 1993. Tone, you want to walk through the movies a little bit?
Absolutely. So in the movies, the top 5 grossing movies of 93 were Jurassic Park, The Fugitive, The Firm, Sleepless in Seattle, and Mrs. Doubtfire, all of which were over $100 million grosses in 1993. Other noteworthy movies included Indecent Proposal and In the Line of Fire, which were number 6 and number 7. And those were the only other 2 movies to eclipse $100 million in 93. Aladdin was number 8 and barely missed 100 million. It was 99.9. However, that was only released on Thanksgiving weekend, and it would go on to gross nearly 220 million in its entire run. So that was another huge movie. But this is just how good movies used to be. In that year where we just rattled off 8 really good movies, you also had A Few Good Men, Groundhog Day, and Dave. which were 8th, 12th, and 13th, respectively. And those three movies, I probably like those three movies better than any of the other ones listed above it.
Specifically, A Few Good Men and Groundhog Day. Groundhog Day is one of my favorite movies of all time. So absolutely love that movie.
Yeah, those two are all timers on anybody our age who likes decent movies. Those two are all timers, and Dave is just definitely one of those that you love. Anytime it's on, you love it.
Yep. Yeah, great movie. Absolutely.
So that was 93 in the movies. How about TV?
In TV, you've got kind of a dominant year for 60 Minutes. So 60 Minutes, both the 92 to 93, 93 to 94, 60 Minutes was number one throughout the year. You've got Roseanne, Home Improvement. And then you've got a little bit of movement between Murphy Brown and Grace Under Fire and Coach. But that pretty much made up the year. There were a couple of notable debuts in 1993. Bill Nye the Science Guy debuted in 1993 in syndication. The X-Files debuted in 1993. Frasier, which is now rebooted on Paramount Plus, was 1993. Deep Space Nine, Boy Meets World, Beavis and Butthead, and The Nanny all debuted in 1993.
Would you believe that I have been compared to Frasier Crane?
I could see that.
I'm not sure if it's so much that I'm Frasier or Rick is Niles.
Rick is Niles. Rick is Niles. I can see the dynamic of you as Frasier and him as Niles 1000%.
All right. So is that it for TV?
That is it for TV. Want to talk about the year in music?
Yeah, let's do it. So I just love looking at the number one albums from different years. It's so fascinating to see how different the years can be. So in 1993, you had 16 different albums that were number one at some point in time. You had the Bodyguard soundtrack. That was the number one album to start the year. It had also finished 92 as the number one album as well. So between 92 and 93, it was the number one album for something like 27 weeks. But it kept going in and out of the number one spot. So like somebody would come out with a new record and it would jump into number one, and then the Bodyguard would come back. So the Bodyguard was the dominant album of the time. It was the top selling album of the year as well. But it's interesting, the list of artists that also had number one albums that year is kind of a who's who in music. You had Eric Clapton, Depeche Mode, Aerosmith, Janet Jackson, Meatloaf, Pearl Jam, Barbra Streisand, U2, Nirvana, Billy Joel, Garth Brooks, and Snoop Dogg all had number one albums that year. I mean, that's really a murderer's row.
It was a pretty prolific year in music, yeah.
And if you think about the styles, everything's represented there. It's really kind of glorious. It's amazing.
And you didn't even mention Wu-Tang.
Well, they weren't number one, but we can mention them as amongst the other notables. So the year ended. The last number one was Mariah with Music Box, and that would go on to actually sell 30 million albums. So that got released towards the end of the year. It ended the year at number one, sold 30 million albums along the way. So just an amazing year as far as number one albums go. Other notable albums were the debut albums from Sheryl Crow and the Cranberries, and you had Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers' Greatest Hits.
Well, one other debut was Bjork's debut album, and Wu-Tang was a debut as well. Enter the Wu-Tang was their debut album.
Really, the whole gamut of music represented in 1993. It's a shame that the kids today can't live in the world that we grew up in, right? I mean, what an amazing time. All right, so we talked about the albums. We'll talk about the singles, and this one is really wild. The disconnect between the top singles and the top albums is crazy. The top 10 singles are pretty bad, and it only gets worse after you go past the top 10. So here's the top 10 singles. You had I Will Always Love You by Whitney, of course. Number 2 was There It Is by Tag Team. And somebody, honestly, those guys ought to be shot. That song is terrible.
Tag Team back again.
You've got Can't Help Falling in Love by UB40. I mean, what a great song and what a horrible, horrible cover. You've got Janet with That's the Way Love Goes. And then you've got these are the top 10 singles of the time. Freak Me by Silk. Weak by SWV. If I Ever Fall in Love by Shy. You got Dream Lover by Mariah, Rump Shaker by Rex in Effect, and Informer by Snow.
All I
What are
want to
we
do is zoom,
listening
zoom,
to?
zoom, zoom, and a boom, boom.
I mean, this is terrible. How could we have so many great albums and such terrible, number top singles? So well, anyway, so the other notables as far as singles go is you've got What's Up by the Four Non Blondes, Two Princess by Spin Doctors, Hey Jealousy from the Gin Blossoms, Runaway Train from Soul Asylum, I'd Do Anything for Love by Meatloaf, and 500 Miles by the Proclaimers.
And
You're
I
not gonna,
would walk 500 miles, and I would walk
for God's sake,
500
you're
more just
Scottish,
to
man.
be the man who walked 1,000 miles to fall down at your door.
Da, da, da. You know what? I should have warned you that I
You
was
should
going to
have
ask
warned
you
me
to
you
do
were
that.
going there because I see. I already had rhythm as a dancer in my head, so
Uh,
you should have warned me you were going. I
uh,
didn't know you were going there.
you know what? That's my bad. Sorry about that. All right, so that's the year in music. So why don't you now tell us about the album that we're talking about today?
It was recorded in Chicago between 92 and 93. It was produced by Liz Phair and Brad Wood. And it was really mostly Liz Phair, Brad Wood, and Casey Rice. It was pretty much the three of them doing all of the instruments, and it was mostly a three piece. And in a lot of songs, it was really stripped down. I mean, there was at least several tracks where there's no bass on it, and it's just very
Mhm.
stripped down. So they were really going for something very, very clean.
Yeah, and I think you could argue it's really the majority of the songs are just two piecers.
Yeah.
And Casey Rice appears on like maybe a handful of them, three on lead guitar and a couple doing some percussion and stuff. But really, it's really Brad and Liz doing this.
Pretty much. And that really played out in how they came together, which I'll save that for a little bit. But this album, 92, 93, she had just graduated school. As we talked about before, she was an artist, but not a performer. But she had this poetry in her head and she had the story of an album arc and she wanted to get this out. So she created this album.
She was an art history major. She really was, studying art and not music. And she talks later on about how she approached this album from an art perspective. Like she was trying to use the songs to show the different layers or facets, like, really approaching her subject from different angles. And her subject was a young woman in America in 1993. So, one of the things that's really, really important to understand is that people got so hung up on, some of the lewd language and imagery that she was evoking, and also thinking that this represents who she is and whatnot. No, she was trying to portray that women are complex, women are multifaceted, and at the same time that all this was coming out, we're still living through the Motley Crue hair metal. I mean, holy crap! Who could be more sexualized than the music of that time? But it's okay when the men were doing it, and it was wrong when the women. So she was just trying to say, hey, we're also sexual creatures, and why do we have to suppress that and pretend like these desires and urges don't exist?
Beautifully said. And I think that, the juxtaposition of the objectification that you see in those male centric rock bands where, you look at any of those videos and it's, what is it?
Holy cow. Yeah.
I mean, look at Motley Crue as an example. Every single one of their songs was about women. Their biggest song was Girls, Girls, Girls.
Yeah. And this is, I didn't read this anywhere, but it's no accident. There's a song on this album called Girls, Girls, Girls.
I know.
which
I'm
is, sorry. Are we stepping on
the
track review? Yeah.
It's all good, but
yeah.
It all ties. So she really was making this piece of performance art that is multifaceted. And like you said, I mean, she considered herself kind of prissy, even like she did not see herself as this, overt person. And like, I've read some articles and heard some interviews where she talked about the first time that she had to actually like sit, and her parents heard this album. She's like, oh my God, like, they're going to hear this. And she was trying to do exactly what you said. She was trying to show that women are just as complex as men are, and they shouldn't be, looked at as less in any way, shape, or form. And it's okay to feel sexual. That's fine.
What it made me think about was Amy Schumer and how Amy Schumer is her comedy is very much to me like what Exile and Guyville is in music. And she is the same story. She's not the, incredible, raging, man crazy, I have to have sex every day woman that she portrays in her act. She's trying to, make a point about women and how they're the way they have to present themselves and have to hide, their true selves is different than how men get to just be their authentic selves all the time. So that's what I thought of when I was listening to and researching this album.
Yeah, no, but I think it's a great parallel as well. So,
all right. So album titles. Exile in Guyville is clearly an echo of Exile on Main Street by the Rolling Stones. Now, what is Guyville? So Guyville is the part of Chicago that she was hanging out in, Wicker Park. It had become really a artist community that was in an old, like, rundown industrial area, sort of abandoned. And the city of Chicago, I think it was like in 1988, wanted to sort of rejuvenate it. So they made it, were trying to make it into an artist haven. And sure enough, it worked because a lot of bands set up shop there to rehearse and practice and play in, in these abandoned warehouses and things like that. So that was Wicker Park. And she nicknamed it Guyville after a local band that, she was very friendly with, Urge Overkill. They had a song called Goodbye to Guyville, talking about Wicker Park. And that was where she got the reference for Exile in Guyville.
I've read and heard, and I know you've seen the same, that it's a track for track response to Exile on Main. I don't find the parallels exactly there. I mean, I've heard her talk it through, and basically she says, I wasn't trying to mirror every song. I was trying to take something from each of the songs and do that in the track. So I get it on that level, but I think the number of tracks and some of the tenor of it actually connects, but the track for track response, I don't always easily connect the dots.
You're being polite. I think that the notion that this is a track for track response is a load of hooey. It's just not true. It's not true. I've listened to this album at least 30 times. It is not a track by track response. But like you said, there's 18 tracks. She's definitely, in some songs, she's definitely channeling the Stones or specifically Exile. She might be touching on themes or responding to themes in some songs, but it is not a track by track response. And I think that it does a disservice, frankly, to the album by presenting it that way, because if you are listening to it, looking for that, you might get turned off because it's not true.
For me, it was a little bit of a distraction. Chasing that and trying to find the connection was a little bit of a distraction. When I let that go and looked at it and said, okay, I can see some parallels. I can see how she's trying to basically take some of the thematic things that you see on Exile on Main and bring them to her album from a woman's point of view. That I can see. But track by track, I struggle with it.
I agree with you 100%. Say it's inspired by, that works. But saying it's track by track is a distraction. So I really wish that narrative would go away, because once I let go of that, I really enjoyed the album so much more.
Yeah, I agree with you.
All right. So anyway, I don't know if we went off track there, but let's get back on schedule and tell us about the album art.
We talk about album covers in every episode, and some of them are interesting and some of them are just, kind of a cool picture or whatever. This album cover is so fascinating on so many levels. It's a very simple picture. It's a picture of Liz Phair, cropped. She's topless. She's got like a cloak kind of over her head, or just, there's a trick of the photography that really makes it look very pronounced as a cloak. And really what it was her in a photo booth at the Rainbow Club with Nate Cato from Urge Overkill, just snapping photos in the photo booth. And he's like, it would be really great. you should just do picture topless and we can use that as your photo art. And they wound up doing that in the photo booth at this bar. Nate Cato actually cropped the picture for her, and you can just see, just a slight bit of, nipple in the picture, just enough that it's there, but it's, you can't quite see it, right? And it is a very racy picture. It's overtly sexual, and she's kind of playing the seductress role with the cover.
Yeah, I'd almost say it's not even seductress; it's man-eater, is what I'm seeing when I look at this picture. The other interesting thing is that now we see the actual half areola, but that wasn't available at the time because that got censored out. And so now, because I am familiar with this album cover, and only recently doing the research did I actually see it in its original form. So that was interesting. And did you want to talk about, specifically the areola of it all?
Why don't you go ahead and take it?
So the Urge Overkill guy also told her to put some lipstick on her areola to, make it more pronounced. And she said, "Oh gosh, this guy seems to know a lot about what he's talking about."
Well,
So,
and he did the photo editing, so like he was the he's the guy.
yeah. So if it looks pretty dark, it's not natural. Anything else on the art?
No, I think the only other interesting thing was when they first started talking about doing this album, her first idea was to do an orgy of Barbie dolls floating in a pool, and that went out the window. That was not something that the record execs were too keen on, so she had to go with something else. All right, Tone, I think that takes us to one of our favorite segments, something you might not know. So I know we each have a couple of little tidbits. Do you want to kick it off?
Sure. And I think our tidbits are going to be smaller because we kind of went through a couple of good ones already. So the first one is we're recording this in December. So we're heading into holiday season. Right before the show, we were talking about recording our holiday movie episode. So really looking forward to that. So with that in mind, Liz Phair grew up in a town called Winnetka, Illinois. And you're looking at me. I can see your face. You know what I'm talking about?
It's John Hughesville.
Well, I don't think Winnetka is necessarily where all the other movies took place, but one particular movie definitely took place in Winnetka, and that is...
Was it Home Alone?
It was Home Alone. So Winnetka, Illinois, could you imagine, it's hard to not, once you know that, I just love imagining, Liz Phair growing up in the house next to Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone. So why don't you give us your first something you might know?
I'm going to talk a little bit about a tape that's known as the Girly Sound tape.
It's actually 3 tapes. Girly Sound is the name that she gave her act, and she recorded 3 demos under Girly Sound.
I'm looping them together because it's subsequently been released. But yes, it was 3 demo tapes that basically made the rounds. So she created this art piece centered around her vision of what it was like for a woman living in the world in the early 90s. And she had these tapes that made it amongst this group of people in the Chicago area. And somehow the tape got to Brad Wood, and he listened to it and he said, "I've got to make this album." And basically her making these demo tapes, someone who was not a musician, who was really just an artist, led to that getting in front of Brad Wood and led to basically this album and this whole vision coming to being made, which I think is just mind-boggling.
I love how, when you consider it an art piece and then you consider the Girly Sound name, it makes sense. Like in a vacuum, it's like Girly Sound sounds kind of dumb, but when you think about it as an art piece talking about what it's like to, musically describing what it's like to be a woman, it's really a perfect name for the band or the project. So she was living with a guy named John Henderson, who ran a independent record label, and she was like renting a room in his apartment. And so she's crashing there. She's living there, and So John Henderson's in the music business, running this independent label. Brad Wood's a producer and has a recording studio. They had all been at a wedding for a mutual friend, and Liz was passed out in her room. It was late at night or whatever. And that's where John plays for Brad her tapes. So Liz was in the next room passed out when Brad Wood first heard the Girly Sound tapes, and he was like totally blown away, as you were saying. But then as Brad gets introduced to Liz and they start working on recording, what would become Exile, Liz and John have a falling out. So she stops living in Wicker Park in Guyville at John's place, and she moves home to Winnetka. So that was like a real barrier. And then, Brad Wood had to basically commute back and forth from Wicker Park to Winnetka to go fetch her, bring her back, record songs, and then bring her back home. And then he had to go home. So that's the whole John Henderson, how he introduced Liz and Brad.
Clearly, Brad Wood saw something because, this absolutely brilliant album that stood the test of time. But the fact that he was willing to commit to going and grabbing somebody and bringing them back to record with that, unknown, is pretty amazing.
Yeah, he described working with Liz in those early days as like he felt like he had discovered his Bob Dylan or his Patti Smith, and he just knew that there was something here, and he was right.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I heard a lot of those interviews and whatnot, and definitely the reverence you hear in his voice when talking about her is just amazing.
All right, so your next one.
Just a quick one. So we'll talk about it when we get to a few of the songs, but in one of the interviews, and there was a documentary that was done on Guyville, they make it very clear that Liz Phair was actually childhood friends with John Cusack, and actually one of her friends was dating John Cusack. And in the song Dance of the Seven Veils, Johnny My Love is supposedly an allusion to both John Cusack, because they're talking about a character who's famous and whatnot, but also John the Baptist. So it's kind of a little bit of an allusion to both, is what I've heard.
That's interesting. So I'll talk about that some more in my when we go through the track review, because I've got my own read. It's not anything I read anywhere else. It's just my own interpretation. So, all right. And my last one is Matador Records. So this album was released on Matador, and the way that came to be is they ran out of money. They ran out of money when they were trying to get this record made, and Brad Wood suggested that they reach out to the head of Matador Records. Fortunately, he happened to have read a review of Girly Sound in like an underground magazine. Like, it's not even like the Chicago Tribune or anything. It's just like an underground music magazine that gets handed out, locally. But he got a hold of it. He read it. He either heard of the project, and said, all right, fine, we'll give you some money to finish the record. And that's how it ended up on Matador. So that was a bunch of pretty good stuff on something you might not know. Where does that leave us in our outline here? So
today, because we have a really long album, what I think we agreed to do is we're going to do a track by track discussion in the context of our song draft. So we're going to pick 6 songs each, and we'll cover 12 of the tracks. And then if there's anything left that's notable, we can spend a minute or two on it.
So does that mean we're actually going to do the draft, and while we're doing the draft, we're going to talk about the tracks?
You got it, Tone.
All right, let's do it. I don't know if I'm prepared for this, but you threw me a curveball.
Well, you get to go first, so you better be ready for it.
You would think the easiest thing for me to know going into these would be what position I pick in, and yet I never have any idea. So, all right, well then this one's going to be easy. I'm going to go with my favorite song on the album, and that is Divorce Song. To me, this is just a super cool song because it's so visually and emotionally descriptive. And, I kind of love the way it begins. I'm going to use a fancy term that I've heard recently. It's in medias res. And that just means it starts in the middle. And I love the way it starts in the middle. The first words are, and when I asked. And I think that's just a cool device to drop us in the middle of the story of this relationship. that's probably, like a long-term relationship, and they're having a hard time. And I love that aspect of the song.
I love this song. So really great pick, Tone. I mean, the imagery of a couple just bickering, a couple that's been together for a while. And the way that Liz Phair describes it is she sees it as a couple that's in a car and they're on this trip and they're just at each other. And like what I get from this song is I get a quiet punk feel at the start of the song, and it really builds as a rock and roll song. And I love the harmonica bit at the end. I just absolutely love this song.
I feel like I love every line of the song. And to me, the other interesting thing is it's not a song structured the way songs normally are. There's no verses, choruses, bridges, or anything like that. To me, I think this is just prose.
She's reading a poem. Exactly. It's really very much poetry laid out as music.
So I originally was thinking that too, and I do agree with that for most of the songs, but I say specifically for this one, prose, because I think we're getting dropped into a novel or a short story, not necessarily a poem. This is to me, a novel, and we're getting dropped in, but we're splitting hairs, I suppose. But so anyway, and I'm going to talk about this song just a little bit more because it is my favorite song. I love the line. The next line is, or one of the next lines is, but if I'd known how that would sound to you, I would have stayed in your bed.
How that would sound to you, I would have stayed in your bed for the rest of my life, just to prove I was right, that it's harder to be friends than lovers, and you shouldn't try to mix the two, 'cause if you do it and you're still unhappy, then you know that the problem is you.
It's just like, I was mad. I meant what I said, but not so much that I wouldn't take it back as soon as I could.
Well, and then you get to the end of the song and you get, really where you see where this relationship is at. And the license said you had to stick around until I was dead.
You had to stick around until I was dead. But if you're tired of looking at my face, I guess I already am.
Isn't that great? What a great line that is. I love that line. It's so great. So anyway, divorce song, my number one pick.
So I'm going to go to what I would say would be my number one pick. I'm not going to say the full name of the song. I'm just going to say F and Run, which personally I think is the best track on the album. It's the type of track that would have made her a radio star if it actually could have been played on the radio. But the fact that the name of the song was F and Run, it was never going to be on the radio. You've got this amazing, for me, stripped down song that highlights her guitar talent. And you get a Stones Shattered feel. You get a Go-Go's feel. You get 2 tracks of drum, Liz's guitar, 2 vocals from Liz, and Brad Wood singing harmony. And there's no bass guitar, and there's sleigh bells. This song is freaking brilliant.
I love this song too. This is such a great song. And people, again, like when people are not even trying to understand what the art is telling you, they get hung up on the F word in the title. But what this is about is, it's a song about a young woman who wants love and a relationship, and she keeps finding herself in these one night stands. This is not glorifying it. It's disappointment.
100%. The lead of the song is, I want a boyfriend, I want a boyfriend. I mean, and it's a repeated theme in the song. It's exactly that. But it's talking about what the experience was in trying to get to what she wanted. She wasn't getting what she wanted.
Exactly. That's a great pick. I really love that song. My next pick is going to be like my 1A. It's Mesmerizing. I just love this song. To me, this song is one of the few songs that you could say is absolutely channeling directly the Rolling Stones. This song is such a banger. It has that great guitar riff. It's got the cool hand claps. You've got some maraca sounds. It really feels like a Stones song. And then Mesmerizing, echoes a line from Rocks Off, which is, I think, the first song on Exile on Main Street, where they say, it's all mesmerized, all that inside of me. So I think that it's a conscious echo to an Exile on Main Street song, and the sound is absolutely a Rolling Stones song.
I completely agree. You get the bluesy guitar, but you also get this really, and this is another theme with her, with how she has her voice throughout the album.
Mhm.
So you get this very monotone voice, and she's almost got the imitation of the male masculine rockiness in the song. So you've got that monotone. But I also, for me, this song, if I were to say who it sounds like to me, also, I go right to one of her contemporaries. It sounds a lot like a Sheryl Crow song. This song could be a Sheryl Crow song in my mind.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I didn't think of that, but now that you say it, for sure. One last thing I'll add on that is at the end of the song, you can barely hear it, and you really wouldn't notice it unless you were listening for it. But the end of the song, you can hear the sound of a dog that is like fighting to hold on to a toy. And that's actually exactly what was happening. Casey Rice's dog was in the room, and while they're recording, the dog is messing with Casey, and you actually hear that at the end if you turn it up.
That's brilliant. That is brilliant.
All right.
All right.
What's next
so
for you?
I am up, and I wrote a song down, and I'm going to cross it off, and I'm going to say something else. I'm going to say 6 Feet 1. You get the rock guitar, you get the low monotone vocals, you get the flow into the chorus. I love the song. It's a great opening for the album. I bet you fall into bed too easily with beautiful girls who are shyly brave.
You fall in bed too easily with the beautiful girls who are shyly brave, and you sell yourself as a man to save.
It's such a freaking amazing opening to this album.
It announces the intention of this album perfectly clearly, I think. I love this song too. I feel like, to me, it's like she is taking like the macho bravado of a man, in the 70s or 60s or whatever Exile came out, and doing her take on it as a 90s woman.
Yeah. Of the songs that I would say have any kind of mirror to Exile, this and Rocks Off as lead tracks, I can kind of see a little bit. This is probably the one that I'd say, okay, I got it. I understand what you did and how you went into the album from a female point of view that kind of counters that. And it set up this song sets up the whole album. And the guitar outro is phenomenal on this.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. One thing that I don't know this as a fact, but I've listened to this song so many times because it's the first track, right? So I've heard it so many times over the last couple of weeks. And in the middle, somewhere in the bridge, she throws in what seems like a random "yeah." And I think when you listen to Exile on Main Street, there's a lot of random whoops and stuff from Mick, and I think she did that intentionally there too.
You are spot on, Tone. I actually just listened to the Rolling Stone magazine podcast where they interviewed Liz Phair, and she said explicitly that exactly, that she randomly threw in words that she heard on Exile on Main throughout the album. So there are yeahs and babies, and like she throws in like Mick Jagger pieces where she kind of can.
Oh, that's funny. So, I love this song. So, I wasn't expecting this next one to be around. I would have picked 6 Feet 1 as my next song, but I'm going to go with Never Said, which is the lead single, or the single and like the most radio friendly track on there. Sometimes it's not cool to pick the obvious, pop song or the radio ready song. This song is just a darn good song, so I picked it. And this is like another example where she has actually explicitly explained how it connects to Exile on Main Street. Oh, this is great. There's who's the most popular, recording artist in the world at this moment?
It's probably Drake, Beyonce, Taylor Swift,
It's Taylor
Rihanna.
Swift. Come on, it's not Drake. Drake is a clown. Drake's a
Dude,
punchline.
dude, like streaming, like he's got a gazillion streams. He's got a
Okay.
gazillion.
Well, okay. Well, we don't need to talk about Drake. So let me back this up and say Taylor Swift is possibly, in my opinion, the biggest recording artist in the world today at this exact moment in time. And Taylor Swift is famous for how she feels track 5 is like the most important song on any of her albums. She makes a big stink about track 5. Well, guess who else does? Liz Phair. She actually explicitly says something along the lines of, I feel like track 5 is the most important song on the album. On Exile on Mainstream, it was Tumbling Dice. And that's where I wanted to put my big song. So that's why she slotted Never Said here at number 5. It's a pretty straightforward song. It's very radio friendly. And it's just talking about the cattiness of the music scene in Guyville / Wicker Park.
Great song. My notes on it, solid rock song. I enjoyed it. I would say that it was probably lower on my radar from a pick perspective, just because I didn't feel like it was as powerful a statement as some of the other songs were.
Well, I went with my heart. I agree with you. It's not at all a powerful statement, but I just enjoy hearing it. So that's why I picked it where I did.
All right. So I'm up next. I'm going to go with Help Me Mary, which was actually what I almost picked in front of 6 Feet 1. Help Me Mary. I haven't heard her say this explicitly, but this is a prayer. I mean, this is a rock prayer about misogyny and her experience of how she's treated even in her own house. People come to her house and are in her apartment, and this is how she gets treated in her own space.
Help me, Mary, please. I've lost my home to thieves. They bully the stereo and drink. They leave suspicious things in the sink. They make rude remarks about me. They wonder just how wild I would be.
It's just fascinating. And at the end of the song, I'm asking you, Mary,
I'm
please.
asking you, Mary, please. Temper my hatred with peace. Weave my disgust into fame. And watch how fast they run to the flame.
Temper my hatred with peace, weave my disgust into fame, and watch how fast they run to the flame. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. One of my favorite lines on this whole album.
Yeah, I love this song. That's a great line, but it's great line not in and of itself, but because it encapsulates the rest of the song. And she's just basically saying, help me to live through this crap so that I can become famous and then show them all. This has got such a great bluesy, stonesy sound too, and similar to what you were saying. What I noted was that I thought that this was a metaphor for women's roles in the music scene at the time. So I think that's somewhere along the lines what you were saying. And what I was thinking about too was, and partially because we just did Appetite for Destruction, I was thinking about Rocket Queen. I was kind of thinking about this being the story of a woman in the Wicker Park music scene, much like the Rocket Queen was, a woman, an important woman in that LA, hard rock, metal, whatever scene that GNR was in. And I felt like this character in this song could very well be like the equivalent of Rocket Queen.
I think that's a great take.
All right. So I know we're only halfway through, but gosh, I did not expect to be so as into this album as I was until listening to it a bunch of times and learning more about it.
I agree with you 100%. So I just got my year-end review from Apple Music on my most listened to, and I didn't have a full year on Apple Music, but this was my number 2 listen on Apple Music album-wise this year.
All right, so up next for me is Soap Star Joe. I think this is a pretty smart and interesting song. She's basically describing the guys that she's going on these dates. Liz Phair was an attractive woman, and she was a young woman living in a town full of guys, and she didn't have trouble getting dates. She just had trouble finding dates with guys that she actually wanted to be with. And to me, this is sort of an encapsulation of that experience. Going out with all these guys who are just super mediocre, super generic, but they see themselves as heroes, and they're walking around through life like thinking that they're Superman. And meanwhile, they're just absolutely generic, average dudes. That's my take on this song. And then, it also ends with that really cool, bluesy, stonesy harmonica at the end.
Love this song for the bluesy of it, and I really get a Dylan feel to this song. It's a very folk songy type song that's got kind of a blues feel with the harmonica ending, but great song, great pick. Love the song. So next up, I am going to go with probably the most sexually explicit song on this album, and maybe one of the more sexually explicit songs, period. Flower.
Mm-hmm. Go on, talk to me.
So this song is just spoken voice, monotone sexuality, and just woman talking about enjoying sex, short, to the point, and I just really think it's powerful. I think it comes, especially hearing it live, because I was curious how it would be live, because it's very much a spoken word type thing. I was curious what she would do it live, and she kept it pretty true to it. And it's just a short, powerful song.
Every time you pass me by, I heave a sigh of pain. Every time I see your face, I think of things.
And there's a few lines that I can say. You act like you're 14 years old. Everything you say is so obnoxious, funny, true, and mean. And then I'm not going to say the next line.
Yes, and this is also, back to what we were talking about before. This song definitely got people's undies in a twist because of its very pointed and graphic language, but it's graphic for a point. And
I think that's the right way to say it, Tony. It's graphic for a point. I think that's very well said.
And she's, again, just trying to depict a woman in full. She's showing that we, have lustful thoughts too. That doesn't mean she's walking around thinking these thoughts 24/7. It's that, hey, we like this stuff too. It's not just you. Why is this just your domain? So I think that's what the point is, that she's saying that it's okay for us to have the same desires and thoughts and feelings as men.
Completely agree. And I think between this song and F and Run, these two songs gave the album a lot of buzz because of how explicit they were.
Okay, so up next is me.
Up next is you with your number nine overall.
All right, so I'm going to go back to Dance of the Seven Veils.
I was hoping that would make it back to me.
And this is where I'm going to give you my take on this song. Like I said before, didn't read this, haven't heard this anywhere, so I could be making this all up. But here's how I read the song. First of all, she talks about Johnny, my love. I mentioned at the top of the show, she was living with John Henderson, who's the music record label owner. I don't know whether or not they were dating, but they were definitely involved at the very least musically. And obviously they were involved personally because she lived at his place, but she was renting a room. So they weren't like, shacking up in that regard. So they had a falling out. And before she actually finished the album, she had to move home. So this sounds to me like, referencing that breakup, if you will, of that personal and professional relationship. She very descriptively, she talks about how she wants to kill Johnny. Well, imagine that you're fighting with this friend, this person that's you're close to, and they kick you out of the apartment that you're living in, yeah, you might want to kill them.
Johnny, my love, get out of the business. It makes me want to rough you up so badly. Makes me want to roll you up in plastic. Toss you up and pump you full of lead.
She explicitly says she refers to herself as the C word in spring. And I could imagine that there was a fight where he calls her the C word, and, while, their friendship was ending. And then the second verse describes a marriage scene. And then, she's saying that, all we need is a preacher, talking about a marriage scene. Well, she's trying to make a record. He's a record label owner. I feel like they were talking about him signing her and putting out her record, and then they ended that relationship. So I think that there's multiple layers where this song could totally just be about the end of her relationship with John Henderson. But then again, I could be making it all up.
So I think that makes complete sense contextually. I mean, I've heard the documentary take on it where it's, basically the story, it's a third person view of a story of what her girlfriend at the time, who was dating John Cusack and whatnot, as well as just, a more generalized story. But I could see that. I mean, it definitely makes sense with what was going on in her life of it. You can kind of connect the dots. But great song. I was hoping it would make it back to me. Obviously, it didn't. I would say, from the musicality of it, it's just a really solid song, and especially the lilting when she gets to entertainers may bring May flowers. It's almost got like an Irish lilt to it at that point. So there's just some very cool parts of this song. So really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, number 10. I am going to go with Girls, Girls, Girls. So for me, you get the bass entry, and then you get this really interesting song. You've been around enough to know that if I want to leave,
You've been around enough to know that if I wanna leave, you better let me go, because I take full advantage of every man I meet. I get away almost every day with what
I get away almost every day with what the girls call murder. It's a simple song. It's got 4 stanzas in it. I mean, it is a very short poem of a song, and I think it's got a strong message.
I really like this song, but I think that it needs to really be paired with F and Run. I think that these 2 songs are a couplet, if you will, because if you think back to F and Run, it's about how she's longing for a boyfriend in a relationship. The character in Girls, Girls, Girls is the opposite. That's the man eater. That's the character who's just out to seduce and, basically being a man in this world. She's playing that part in Girls, Girls, Girls.
She's playing exactly that part. And to your point, they are a couplet. They're back to back on the album,
Mm-hmm.
and I got them both.
Well, then, well done, la-di-da to you. So how many do we have left?
1 each.
1 each. So this is tricky. I'm going to have to trust my board. All right. I'm going to go with Explain It to Me. This, I'm not exactly sure why. I have no idea what this song is about, but it creates this really cool, moody sound that I like. It's very simple. It's just the same quiet guitar riff repeated over and over again. And the sound is slightly different. It's not as jangly as most of the guitar on this album. And then you have this slow, steady drum beat. And that drum beat is the heartbeat of the song, and it just keeps beating and beating. And then the song even ends and the guitar fades out, but that drum beat continues for like another 15 seconds. So don't know what it's about, but really just like the vibe, the mood of that song. So Explain It to Me is my last pick for the draft.
So I've loved the song. I think it's got a very simple melody and a very, easy beat, and it would have been in consideration for me as my last pick. But I am going to go with the one I probably would have picked over it, and pick Strange Loop. So for me, Strange Loop is a great way to end this album. I don't know. When I listen to this song, it sounds like a Nirvana song. It's got very much of I am a rock star. So it's almost like she made this journey through exile on Maine, and she ends with this song that is very contemporary rock star of the time. Baby, I'm tired of fighting. I always wanted you. I broke up at the roadhouse.
I broke up at the roadhouse. I wouldn't know you were alive. You haven't seen me for weeks now. It wouldn't shock you if I drove right out to the back of your eyes. I can't be trusted. They're saying I can't be true. But I only wanted more than I knew.
And then she just finishes with, baby, I'm tired of fighting. I always wanted you. I only wanted more than I knew. It's again, a short lyric song, but I think very powerful.
All right. Well, this song was one I was thinking about, but it just didn't make it high enough. So didn't really, I kind of like the song, but there's some, I thought maybe the end wasn't as cool as she thought it was. And I guess you thought it was. So maybe this is a me problem. So it's not a bad song, but definitely not one of my top 12. But I guess that wraps up our draft portion, which means there are 6 songs that we didn't pick, right?
There are 6 songs that we didn't pick. And for me, this album, I think, is another case of, and we talk about this all the time, I think this would have been a spectacular 10-track album. I'd probably put it legitimately in my 50 best albums of all time if it was a 10-track album.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when you get past track 10, what you're getting quality-wise is not as good. I think the first 10 tracks that I would pick off this album, I would stack up against a lot. I think they're pretty special.
And, and the songs are pretty short too. So I'd even be willing to extend it to 12. So I think 10 is a great number. I think 12 is a perfectly good number as well. But I agree with you. It's just, she may have been too married to the idea of the Exile on Main Street track for track, supposedly. And you know what? If in fairness, that absolutely was a hook that works. So if the price of that is you have to put on 4-6 songs that aren't great, but you're still using that hook of the response to Exile on Main, it's probably a good strategic move. But just artistically, I could have done without at least 4 of these songs.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I actively don't like the last 6, but I would say they're not as good. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there are a couple songs there that I'd like. I enjoy Shatter. It's very mellow. It's it's kind of dark. I enjoy Gun Shy and Stratford on Guy, but nothing stands out to me. It's not like there's nothing that I like, oh my God, I have to talk about this guitar
Mm-hmm.
riff, or I have to talk about this, this lyric. There was nothing that stood out.
I agree. So as far as those songs, I will just had a couple of things I wanted to mention. So you mentioned Stratford on Guy, and I was surprised to see, well, at least according to Wikipedia, that this was actually the other single from the album. And, I don't know if that's true, but if it is true, it's kind of a weird choice because this is just not that interesting of a song. She was going for something. She was going for, the obvious, inclusion of On Guy. and the echo to Stratford upon Avon, so she was going for something where she was trying to talk about how, the people in Guyville, were all pretentious about their scene, and as if they were living where Shakespeare wrote all his plays at Stratford upon Avon. So that's what she's going for, but I don't think she delivers on it in the song. So it just becomes a little flat to me with that one. Any of the songs from the bottom six you want to comment on?
No, not really. I mean, I think, again, generically perfectly fine, but nothing standing out.
I'll say Shatter is a song that I hadn't thought about, really in all my listens to it until I started to get a little bit of like, there's like an underlying, very quiet guitar playing in the background, and it gave me some Edge vibes. So that's the only thing that I had to note on Shatter. Apart from that, I thought it was a pretty either generic or like song that didn't connect with me.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing with that one is it's just got that long instrumental intro, and it doesn't feel like an accessible intro. Like it's not, it doesn't draw, like for me, the intro didn't draw me in.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, where does that leave us here in our exercise?
That leaves us with final thoughts, Tone. I think we are at the end of our show today.
All right. Well, I'll start. I knew that this was an important album in music. I didn't know why. I mean, I knew generically why, like, sort of bringing the women with guitars more into the forefront, but it wasn't one that I'd really ever listened to, like literally had never listened to. I'd heard a couple of the songs, but I'd never listened to the album ever until a couple of weeks ago. So glad for having done that, because boy, I really, really love this album.
Yeah, I'm very much in the same boat. As I think we both talked about at the beginning, this was not something that was, front and center for me, but having spent weeks with this, listening to it, I really am glad it's a part of what I've done this year, and I'm glad it's a part of my music pantheon now. These are things that I'm going to listen to going forward. I'm picking things that mean something to me as I go through, listening to albums, and this one definitely connects. I mean, I went to see Barbie with Chris, and she was just so emotional at the movie, and specifically the speech by America Ferrera. And this album does a lot of the same things that I think the message of that movie, but it did it in 1993.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sad I missed it. I really am. And I think that says something.
I mean, it definitely says something, but I will also give us a little grace and say the 21-year-old versions of us, 22-year-old versions of us probably wouldn't have received the message. I don't know that I was mature or aware enough to understand the point of this album.
I can agree with that 100%, especially some of the very explicit songs would have just come across as very sexual.
Mm-hmm. All right. So our last item of business, as always, is Bill. Where does this rank in your incredibly OCD personal top 500 albums of all time?
So I kind of gave a little teaser of I probably would rate this album higher if it was a little shorter. It's definitely a top 100 album for me. I think seeing this at 56 on Rolling Stone's list, that resonates with me. I understand it. Personally, I put it at 91. I think if this was a 10 or 12 track album, I would clearly put it in the top 50. I just think that the quality and you lose a little bit of the message because the quality gets diluted at the bottom part of the album.
Yeah, I mean, to be an all-timer, got to be no skips, and there's skips here.
Yeah, agreed. So number 91.
All right, so that takes us to the end of this episode. Bill, why don't you take us out?
All right. Well, thank you for listening, everyone. We hope you come back and join us on our next excellent adventure. And we can't wait to hear from you. So please reach out. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon.